Hey everyone, welcome to our second A Song of Ice and Fire hour. The first one I have still not uploaded, so if you're watching this and you weren't in the Discord at the time, you are probably wondering what's going on here. But what is going on is that me and my estimable host, Lindbergh, are going to be looking at our favorite nerd book. Isn't that right?
That's right. Hello, everyone. I'm Lindbergh, in case you don't know me.
Yes, she is on the Discord. She's one of the ducklings. And then this live stream should be open to everybody, regardless of whether they're paying or not on Patreon. Right now, we've got 4 people, which isn't too bad. We'll see if more trickle in over time. But yeah, we're just doing this because I really like A Song of Ice and Fire, and I needed a co-host, and Limburg is also a nerd. Um, so the one we're going to be looking
Geek.
at
The
today.
term is geek.
Oh, yes, no, geek. Okay, not nerd, geek. Nerds have pocket protectors, geeks have contacts. Is that the difference?
Yes. Thank you, Science. Fantastic. I
It,
was just
it,
saying, this isn't nice hair. This is sweaty hair because I've been running around trying to get ready in time. So yeah,
she, yeah, Limburg has a, do you want to tell them a little bit about your hobby that's basically a lifestyle job?
it's not basically a lifestyle. It is a lifestyle. I breed horses, and right now we have a foal, and his little front legs are very tired, so I need to stretch him twice a day. So I've
That's
been out
so
doing that.
cute. That's so cute, though, just stretching a foal with their absurdly long legs.
Yeah, he's like, when you lift his front leg, he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna fall over now." I'm like, "No, stand up, stand up. You can stand on 3 legs." And he's like, "No, no, I'm gonna fall over."
Just being dramatic.
Yep.
Okay, do you want to talk a little bit about this chapter before we start? The basic premise is that this is the second book in the series, A Clash of Kings, and this is the prologue. And what's happening is usually the prologues, or always the prologues, and epilogues are from point of view characters who otherwise don't have point of views. And in this case, we're going to be introduced to a faction that we weren't really introduced to in the first book. And by this point, a civil war has broken out, the War of the Five Kings, and this is from the perspective of Maester Cressen, who is the Maester, which is like a generic smart guy advisor to Stannis Baratheon, who is the brother of the dead king and thinks he has a claim to the throne.
What do you mean thinks?
I mean, the whole incest thing was a little bit.
Pistolas, pistolas. The one
Oh
true
man,
king. Anyway, yes,
hand
Stannis
crossbows.
has his seat on Dragonstone, even though the Baratheon family's seat is Storm's End, and his maester is very old. And this is our first look at Stannis, the one true king.
Yeah, me and Limburg are kind of both Stannis stans. He is the best character, and he is the one true and rightful king. And it's a pain for him, but he's willing to take on that burden.
Oh yes,
That's
so
what's so funny
so
about Stannis.
willing to sacrifice.
He's so grumpy about having to be the one true king. He's like, fine, it's not up to me. The rule of law matters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of one of the themes that I don't know how much that's in this prologue because I haven't started it for a while, or I haven't read it for a while. But one of the big themes in Stannis's chapters is like, what's the law? What's the difference between human cost and the law? What's justice? And especially in like a feudal setting, how important is it for a ruler who, doesn't have really any checks on their power to follow the law even when it's inflexible.
We mostly see that in Davos's chapters, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Okay, so you want to do the first part?
Sure. I haven't actually read through this. I've been so naughty. Prologue. The comet's tail spread across the dawn, a red slash that bled above the crags of Dragonstone like a wound in the pink and purple sky.
Okay, excellent. First, Martin is always really good at creating these evocative first paragraphs. that like, a red slash the blood across the skies. We're probably going to be doing less of the prose breakdown than me and Katie do in our critique ones, just because Martin has a very specific writing style that once you get used to, it's not like, you know, pointing out that he does the rule of threes a lot isn't going to be super useful.
No, he does what he does. He's pretty laconic, but then every once in a while he'll spice it up, like one of his intro sentences. And basically, the theme for this whole prologue, as we'll realize, is red.
Yeah, that's true. If it has a color, the color is red.
Yeah.
Okay, you go and read the next part then, because you have such a wonderful reading voice.
The maester stood on the windswept balcony above his chambers. It was here the ravens came after a long flight, the dropping speckle, the gargoyles that rose 12 feet tall on either side of him, a hellhound and a wyvern, 2 of the 1,000 that brooded over the walls of the ancient fortress. When first he came to Dragonstone, the army of stone grotesques had made him uneasy, but as the years passed, he had grown used to them, and now he thought of them as old friends. The 3 of them watched the sky together with foreboding.
I like how he says the 3 of them. I think that's like kind of clever. It's one of the time. It's Martin is a little bit clever with his prose sometimes in a way that you don't really see from other people. It's like, oh, okay, that logically makes a certain amount of sense, but isn't necessarily how somebody else would have anthropomorphized them.
Yeah, it isn't. Sometimes you talk about prose being true, and this is sort of true-ish, but it's also this kind of technique of bringing the surroundings alive around the character. Like you'll see writers illustrating like the trees we're watching, or the stones had eyes, and as a sort of way of making the character feel like they are fully integrated in the world around them.
Yeah, and the thing about it is that sometimes that's a little cliche, like the trees were watching. But in this case, he just made a point that they were friends, and so like, yeah, it kind of makes sense that they would be watching them together. And so I like that. And again, it tells you something about Cressen a little bit. The Maester did not believe in omens, and yet, old as he was, Cressen had never... Is it Cressen or Cressen? No, it is Cressen. Had never seen a comet half so bright, nor yet that color, that terrible color, the color of blood and flame and sunsets. He wondered if his gargoyles had ever seen its like. They had been here so much longer than he had, and would still be here long after he was gone, if stone tongues could speak. Okay, so they had been here so much longer than he had and would still be here long after he was gone. This is the beginning of Cressen feeling old and like he's at the end of his life. And this is one of the ways that Martin kind of works that into the chapter actually pretty early on.
Mm-hmm. It's a little bit of world building as well. You're sort of slipping it in there kind of subtly.
Mm-hmm. And if stone tongues could speak. Again, Martin is very good at using this like slightly poetic language in a way that like Akatar isn't. Like I think of a lot of the prose we read now and like how it just isn't really making even an effort to sound medievally.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you can do the next part.
Such folly. He leant against the battlement, the sea crashing beneath him, the black stone rough beneath his fingers. Talking gargoyles and prophecies in the sky. I am an old man, grown giddy as a child again. Had a lifetime's hard-won wisdom fled him along with his health and strength? He was a maester trained and chained at the great citadel of Old Town. What had he come to when superstition filled his head as if he was an ignorant field hand?
Okay, all right, so this is another example of Martin beginning to slip in the mind state and the conflict of the chapter, which is that Cressen, like, thinks he's a smart man, but there is this eldritch magic to Melisandre, who he's going to meet in a little bit, that he doesn't understand, and he keeps telling himself isn't real, but, like, so you have that kind of already that, like, oh, this can't be... Like that idea and that kind of conflict and theme is worked in actually pretty easy and early in the chapter so that it doesn't feel like abrupt when it comes up.
Yes, and the maesters are, as we know by now, they're men of science. They are trained in the scientific arts of healing, and They attempt to keep track of the knowledge of the world, and they want to bring the world forward into the future. So it's a very effective way of sort of just slipping it in there, how very threatened he is by Melisandre.
Yeah, and also how it kind of cuts to the core of who he is as a character. This isn't a superficial conflict. This is a he is deeply grounded in this in his life, and he is at the end of his life. And yeah, oh, actually, you go ahead and read it because you read really well.
And yet, the comet burned even by day now, while the pale grey steam rose from the hot vents of Dragon Mount behind the castle, and yestermorn a white raven had brought word from the citadel itself, word long expected but no less fearful for all that, word of summer's end. Omens, all, too many to deny. What does it all mean? He wanted to cry.
Again, we can see him even as a man of science, like emotionally, he's like, I'm frustrated. Yeah, this is all good. Another thing to point out is that this is the second book in a very long, complicated series, and so Martin is using this as a chance to kind of catch you up a little bit on what's been happening in the last book. I recently read Apostles of Mercy with Maria, and that book has the problem that it does not remind you of things that happened earlier in the series, and it's been like 3 years since the last book came. Well, it hasn't been 3 years, it's been like 2. And so like I actually had just forgotten about entire plot points because it's like, you kind of, but this is a good way of both setting up tension while then also doing an info dump, which is something that I see people have a lot of trouble with, is info dumps. But I think this is a good way of getting it across because it also is relevant to who Cressen is as a person. He's tying those three things together. He's tying together the tension, the character, and the world building. So it's all doing like triple duty.
Yes, he's bringing in one of the main themes from the first book, which is basically that summer has lasted for a very long time and everyone is dreading winter.
Yes. Okay. Go ahead and read the next part.
Mr. Cressen, we have visitors. Pylus spoke softly, as if loath to disturb Cressen's solemn meditations. Had he known what drivel filled his head, he would have shouted. The princess would see the white raven. Ever correct, Pylus called her princess now, as her lord father was a king. King of a smoking rock in the great salt sea, yet a king nonetheless. Her fool is with her. The old man turned away from the dawn, keeping a hand on his wyvern to steady himself. Help me to my chair and show them in.
I like keeping a hand on his wyvern. Again, he didn't just say these are old friends. Like, no, he's actually acting kind of like they're old friends. It's also a way of trusting the reader to remember it. It gives also a sense of place. These are like, again, the little notes that I think people ignore, because I've heard so many times that Martin isn't a great writer, or his prose aren't great, they're very workmanlike. And I just don't think that's true after having read so many terrible prose. Like, there's so many small things he does that are so effective. And I like that.
Yes, he knows how to evoke sense of space by using little, very succinct details, whilst a lot of writers, they rely on too much prose in order to build, atmosphere and a sense of space.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And it's very quick in the way he does it.
Yes.
Taking his arm, Pylus led him inside. In his youth, Cressen had walked briskly, but he was not far from his 80th name day now, and his legs were frail and unsteady. 2 years past, he had fallen and shattered a hip, and it had never mended properly. Last year, when he took ill, the Citadel had sent Pylus out from Old Town, mere days before Lord Stannis had closed the Isle. To help him in his labors, it was said, but Cressen knew the truth. Pylus had come to replace him when he died. He did not mind. Someone must take his place, and sooner than he would like. Again, just, he's an old guy, but also he's kind of ready. He's not like grumpy about it or mad or anything. This is a nice way of personalizing him a little bit. And also, it's also very realistic. When old people fall and break their hip, they always have trouble after that point. Like, that's almost always the beginning of a decline.
Yes, Science and Chris. it's very true. Like, it's very efficient prose, and GRM isn't flowery, so that's probably why people don't give his prose the credit it deserves, says Chris. And yes, I actually super agree. Like, people tend to think that the flowerier, the better. Like, they tend to prefer the artistic description over the succinct description, whereas for the reading experience, if you are sort of in the moment and not thinking about the prose, a very succinct prose is often more evocative, in my experience.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it always surprises me people's ability to simply accept the framing that they're given, and if prose are and flowery prose have the aesthetic of being really good prose, and so people just immediately assume that's what good prose are, but they're not. Like, again, I think it was the City of Bright Doors or something, the something of Bright Doors, which like had
The Saint
very
of Bright Doors.
The Saint of Bright Doors, which was just awful, and like the descriptions in it were like, just the descriptions at the time were so bad, and the metaphors and similes and all that stuff they use.
It was laborious and impressive, is how I would describe it.
Yeah, no, that's a good description.
But yes, Hope. Martin uses clever descriptors. I like his prose a lot, to be honest. Yes, Hope. That is what I say to everyone as well. It's not about picking the prettiest descriptors. It's not about expunging too much on things. It's about picking that right little detail and getting it onto the page.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's something that Martin does really well. Okay. When Pylos returned, the girl came with him, shy as ever. Behind her, shuffling and hopping in that queer sideways walk of his, came her fool. On his head was a mock helm fashioned from an old tin bucket, with a rack of deer antlers strapped to the crown and hung with cowbells. With his every lurching step, the bells rang, each with a different voice. Clang-a-dang, bong-dong, ring-a-ling, clong, clong, clong. Katie would hate this so much. She hates onomatopoeia. But again, we talked about this in Sam's chapter, which none of you have watched because I forgot to upload it, or I haven't uploaded it yet because I'm procrastinating. But like, his actually kind of sound like the thing they're describing. And then, again, this is, if you've looked at the thumbnail for this video, you will see the rack of antler deer strapped to the crown. That will become plot relevant in a little bit. I actually find, I forget what his name is, but this fool variant annoying, but
Patchface.
Yeah, Patchface. I just don't find, he's very annoying to me.
No, I love Patchface. And when I say that, I mean that as in, like, he is so creepy and so ominous. The things he say are basically, you'll see, they're basically prophecies, and it's really dark and ominous. I think it's a nice, nifty little tool to just slip in shit like that.
Yeah, that is one of Martin's favorite ways of doing it. Okay, audio listeners, if you're not watching, Lindbergh is having a hair parting difficulties right now, but I think she's figured it out.
I'm having sweaty hair. It's terrible. I'm so sorry.
She's a country girl, guys. That's what's up.
I really apologize.
They also don't have air conditioning in Sweden.
I actually don't understand the discourse. Is that what it's called? Yeah. With, is it onomatopoeia?
Yes, onomatopoeia, where they make, yeah, that's what it's called.
Yes.
I just know Katie doesn't like it.
It's used like this. Because here, I think it really does something to sort of bring to life the bells. It's not just a detail. You can sort of kind of hear them ring in the stone hall. Like bouncing off the hard stone walls.
Yeah, and the other thing is they're used later to be kind of creepy. So no, I agree. I think that's a good choice here. And he actually picked the ones that kind of sound like the thing.
And the same thing, he'll do this for the war horns and the trumpets, and I really like it in those contexts as well. Simply because it helps you sort of hear the scene.
Yeah, it's another sense to bring in. Okay. Go ahead and do the next part.
Who comes to see us so early, Pilus? Cressen said. It's me and Patches, meester. Guileless blue eyes blinked at him. Hers was not a pretty face, alas. The child had her lord father's square jut of jaw and her mother's unfortunate ears, along with a disfigurement all of her own, the legacy of the bout of grayscale that had almost claimed her in the crib. Across half one cheek and well down her neck, her flesh was stiff and dead, the skin cracked and flaking, mottled black and grey and stony to the touch. Pilus said we might see the White Raven. Indeed you may,
so hold on.
Cressen answered.
One thing I like here is the dialogue of who comes to see us so early, Pylos. That is like such a perfect thing an old man would say to a child.
Yes. Yeah.
Of like, yeah,
he's immediately accommodating for her presence.
Mm-hmm. And also
in that way that people who are used to children do.
Yeah. Again, it shows Cressen as like, okay, this isn't a stuffy old man. He's kindly. And also he's been here a while. They know each other. The reason I'm pointing out all of these is because so many authors struggle to get this done in a timely manner. And so these are just very small ways that you can go like, oh, okay, I know what kind of character this is.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Shireen, who is this princess, I really like her. She's like one of my favorite characters. I think it's very
surprising
cute.
that it's a girl character you like.
I feel bad for her. She's got all the grayscale. Also, he uses the skin cracked and flaking, mottled and gray and stony to the touch. Like, notice how this sentence builds power as it goes on to almost like a little bit of a lyrical extent, and it's what also tells you like that this is a thing of importance.
Mm-hmm. The sentence it starts off slow and then it builds momentum with each clause being longer and having more detail.
That's a really good point. It builds momentum.
Yes.
Okay, you may read the next part.
Indeed you may, Cressen answered, as if he would ever deny her. She had been denied too often in her time. Her name was Shireen. She would be 10 on her next name day, and she was the saddest child that Maester Cressen had ever known. Her sadness is my shame, the old man thought. Another mark of my failure. Maester Pilus, do me a kindness and bring the bird down from the rookery for the Lady Shireen.
Yeah, that started as you doing Shireen and ended with you doing Cressen.
This is why I should read the chapters ahead of time. Mistakes. See my shame, everyone. My shame.
This is your failure. Another mark of your failure. No, when I saw a whole video once on how voice actors do voice acting, and like they'll read it through and they'll put certain characters' voices highlighted and stuff like that, so they don't just like do a raw reading of it the first time. So you'll learn as you become a famous voice actress. For anyone who wants to hire her, she is very affordable because she, it's Sweden. So
are you calling me cheap?
Well, it's Sweden, so the conversion rate is like, it's like 10 whatever Sweden has to $1 American. I'm just kidding. The euro is very strong at the moment.
Yeah, the euro is super strong. Jesus. Yeah. Anyway.
I know, I have to buy stuff from England and it's always annoying. Though they don't always use euros, so I suppose it's the German.
Shame. This is the walk of shame. But yes, I really like Maester Cressen's internal thoughts in this little paragraph. Because her sadness is my shame. Because it really develops his character, because realistically, what could he have done to, make Shireen happier? But it just really helps paint him as a very conscientious and very caring old man.
Yeah, and again, there's an underlying melancholy that he's here at the end of his life. That kind of more than almost okay. So the thing about this is that you get a sense for Dragonstone, the castle they're in, as a very atmospheric, lonely, windswept place. Yeah, I am the native American. I am the native English speaker here.
You're a Native American.
That's one of the problems with that term is technically everyone who lives in a country is a native of that country, but whatever. So one of the ways though that he builds that environment is like he tells you there are descriptions of how windswept it is, but also because the character whose POV this is all filtering through is himself sad. And that's one of the things you see with horror that I think we talked about last time as well, is that it's really about what the character's inner thoughts are like that is really going to determine atmosphere and tone so much more than almost anything else, in my
Indeed.
experience.
Yes, but you can hear his sort of grief and rumination sort of trickle into every single sentence in this little prologue. And that is something Martin consistently does. He lets his characters, the point of view characters' mind state, sort of infuse the narrative and the prose through the entire chapter.
Yeah, very much so. And that's one of the things he's so good at. One of his real
Indeed.
strengths, and one of the things I wish I could do better as a writer. Also, I like Do Me a Kindness. That's just a very nice little medievalism. I have no idea if they actually did it or back then or not, but it feels medievally.
Yeah, he's good at sort of rearranging the way people speak so that it sounds old timey.
Yeah,
It suspends your disbelief, and you're like, yes, they spoke this way. Yeah,
yeah,
I buy
and
it.
you're like, okay, I get it. This isn't like fucking Farah talking about lacy things with rice sand. Do you have
Yeah,
any
they
idea how
don't speak
expensive
like
lace is
20th
in a
century people,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
also uh, he's also very good at letting his characters have an appropriate tone. Like the
Mm-hmm.
characters will always speak in a way that is appropriate according to their station and the people they're talking to's station. You'll never catch them being rude, basically,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It
unless
would be
they mean
my
to be.
Yes, it would be my pleasure. Pilus was a polite youth, no more than 5 and 20, yet solemn as a man of 60. This is again a certain sentence construction Martin tends to have, where he'll say a thing, and then he'll have a contrasting thought to it, and it makes it feel a little clever and flow well. And also, there's something about this that feels like a very old man thought to me, of like, oh, he's like this, and like, oh no, hold on, it's the next sentence that feels old manny to me. If only he had more humor, more life in him. That was what's needed here. That's like it's almost like a little judgmental about like, oh, this is how you should lead your life, which is not necessarily something a child would think or somebody with less life experiences, but for Cressen that makes sense, that like, oh, and also we already have the idea of him as kind of grandfatherly, so this doesn't feel judgmental per se. It feels more
No.
rearing.
Now he's lived his whole life. He's sort of looking down at them all from a sort of position of height and experience. And now he's kind of thinking about the world he'll leave behind when he dies. So
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of see how his thoughts on Pylus is a sort of, oh, this is the person who's going to carry on my legacy. I wish he could have given the fun and the life that I didn't.
Yeah, exactly. So you just see that theme introduced. So Ben says, Master Pylos, bro me a Josh. That's a good point. That's a good point. You actually can use that for funny like things if that's the tone you're going for. But like so many people are not going for. Yeah, Science Fantastic says, my king, I just got back from my Pilates class. I totally want to bang the instructor. Very funny.
Now we're in Akatar.
All right, Grim, and then you can do the next part.
Grim places needed lightening, not solemnity, and Dragonstone was grim beyond the doubt, a lonely citadel in the wet waste surrounded by storm and salt, with the smoking shadow of the mountain at its back. A maester must go where he is sent, so Cressen had come here, with his lord some 12 years past, and he had served, and served well. Yet he had never loved Dragonstone, nor ever felt truly at home here. Of late, when he woke from restless dreams in which the Red Woman figured disturbingly, he often did not know where he was.
Again, we have a nice contrast between like, oh, there's a creeping dread here. We get the first mention of the Red Woman. Martin also does that thing where it's like storm and salt. I don't know why Google just decided to tell me what salt is.
Oh. So this is actually wonderful. Chronologically, this
Uh-huh.
prologue happens after the House of the Undead.
Oh, really?
Yes. Doesn't it? Yes, it does.
I don't
No, wait.
know.
No, it doesn't.
In
No.
terms of
The
events, no, but
dragons aren't birthed. Never mind. Never mind.
no, I think they
I
are
was
birthed
thinking it
yet,
was
aren't
tying
they?
into something. Is this
So
the
the thing is,
first mention of smoke, storm, and salt? Then
I'm actually not positive. The thing is, sometimes these chapters are out of chronological order in when the plot lines are in different places. I forget which one, but he mentioned at one point two of them are very out of sync that you wouldn't necessarily think so because of the
I
structure
think
of,
that's
of
later
point
in
of
the
views.
books, though. No, I'm just confusing things. I was thinking that this was a way of tying into something, but this is actually the introduction to the idea of storm and salt and the smoking sea, because that is one
Yes.
of the defining themes of this book. Because this is the book that introduces the idea of Azor Ahai, isn't it?
Oh yeah, you're right. In this chapter, even.
Yes.
The fool turned his patched and piebald head to watch Pylos climb the steep iron steps to the rookery. His bells rang with the motion. Under the sea, the birds have scales for feathers, he said, clang-a-langing. I know, oh, oh, oh. Okay, this sounds better than it reads. I always found reading this very annoying, but in actual speaking, there's a certain, like, quality to it that I could see
To
working.
the sea, the birds of scales and feathers. He's kind of his lines of dialogue are almost like a chant. There's like a rhythm to
Yes,
them. Under the sea, the birds have scales and feathers.
I
I
know,
know,
oh,
I
oh,
know.
oh.
Oh, oh, oh.
Yeah, see, that, I don't know. Never mind. I still find him annoying. I hate the things he says. They're so dumb.
Honestly, once I thought he was annoying, but then once I realized that the things he said actually matter, I'm like, oh my god, that's so cool. What does this mean?
Yeah, it is one of the fun mysteries and Easter eggs that Martin puts in is what
Oh,
Patchface is
oh,
saying.
Val is making a what's it called? A photo bomb. Fisher birds, get used to it.
For those who
She is
don't
used
know,
to it.
Val has very prophetic on our Valerie on our Discord has very prophetic dreams, and one of her best ones was someone saying spiders or birds get used to it, which I find the funniest thing. So it's kind of a inter-community meme, I guess. Um, Even for a fool, Patchface was a sorry thing. Perhaps once he could evoke gales of laughter with a quip, but the sea had taken that power from him, along with half his wits and all his memory. He was soft and obese, subject to twitches and trembles, incoherent as often as not. The girl was the only one who laughed at him now, the only one who cared if he lived or died. Again, we're on this island. It's not a great place. This is also, again, setting up that, like, Stannis has, like, the third string players. He doesn't even have, like, a very good fool. His fool is more just weird than anything else.
Yeah, it's yet another cornerstone in the building of the sort of sad and sagging temple that is Stannis' life. Like, even his court is, like, a bit small and, a
Yeah,
bit
not
sad
great.
looking.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, you can read this page.
An ugly little girl and a sad food. And Maester makes 3. Now there is a tale to make the men weep. Sit with me, child. Cressen beckoned her closer. This is early to come calling. Scarce past dawn. You should be snugly in your bed. I had dreams, Shireen told him, about the dragons. They were coming to eat me. The child had been plagued by nightmares as far as Maester Cressen could recall. You've talked of this before, he said gently. The dragons cannot come to life. They are carved from stone, child. In olden days, our island was the westernmost outpost of the great freehold of Valyria. It was the Valyrians who raised the citadel, and they had all ways of shaping stone, since lost to us. A castle must have towers whenever 2 walls meet at an angle for defence. The Valyrians fashioned these towers in the shape of dragons to make their fortress seem more fearsome, just as they crowned their walls with 1,000 gargoyles instead of simple crenellations. He took her small pink hand in his own frail spotted one and gave it a gentle squeeze. So you see, there is nothing to fear.
So I actually really like this. That there's good sensory details, and also again, it's just like such a grandfatherly thing to do, and it's also just hilarious that he thinks this is gonna work on a child.
Yeah, it's like, child, let me tell you the ways of the world so you won't be afraid anymore.
And it's like that's not how it works. Again, we have the
Let me
conflict
still your
between
silly fears.
yeah, and again, we have the conflict between science and superstition.
That
Shireen
was
was
also a very subtle way to kind of info dump.
Oh yeah, it's definitely an info dump. I actually probably would have info dumped a little bit less there. But
Yeah.
Martin likes his castles and his epic things. Um, Shireen was unconvinced. What about the thing in the sky? Dala and Matrice were talking by the well, and Dala said she heard the red woman tell Mother that it was dragon's breath. If the dragons are breathing, doesn't that mean they are coming back to life? The red woman, Maester Cressen thought sourly. Ill enough that she's filled the head of the mother with her madness. Must she poison the daughter's dreams as well? He would have a stern word with Dala, warn her not to spread such tales. The thing in the sky is a comet, sweet child, a star with a tail lost in the heavens. It will be gone soon enough, never to be seen again in our lifetime. Watch and see. Shireen gave a brave little nod. Mother said the white raven means it's not summer anymore. Yeah, this is all pretty good. Again, we get a little bit of the red woman is slowly making her presence known, and I also like sourly because that sort of implies a past its prime, and like almost a little bit of a pettiness. So it gives Cressen a little bit of weakness there. It's not like he thought it angrily or something like that. It's like,
Yeah,
oh
and
no, he's old.
he's not like a paragon who has simply seen the truth about Melisandre. Like it is sort of channeling that he's threatened by her. He's
Mm-hmm.
threatened by everything that he is. I also
Everything she
like
is.
this that everyone is thinking about the comet. Like this is the first sort of cornerstone into the building of the comet that appears towards the end of the last book. And everyone
Yes.
thinks the comet is an omen for them. And I just really like this thing that Martin does, where he shows how people will interpret things entirely
Mm-hmm.
from their own perspective. And if it benefits them, they'll just do these really ridiculous interpretations and sort of build a legend around it.
Yes, it is. It's one of my favorite things because it actually does a lot of really useful things. For one thing, it emphasizes the sort of arbitrary view, or not arbitrary, but the personalized viewpoint everybody brings to their own life in terms of like this will help add a tone later that you're not necessarily supposed to believe certain viewpoints and that everybody is an actor in their own right and they're not an author mouthpiece. And I think that's something that's missing from, not to rag on the TV show because that would never end, but the TV show is there's a lack of subjectivity to the characters, so that when they do things it feels like it's being endorsed a little bit more than it is in the books. And also I think it's a nice way of kind of connecting all these storylines that are in very disparate parts and that they're all talking about this one thing, so it kind of makes them seem a little bit less separate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a small trick, but I think it's a really effective one. That is so, my lady. The white ravens fly only from the citadel. Cressen's fingers went to the chain about his neck, each link forged from a different metal, each symbolizing his mastery of another branch of learning. The maester's collar, mark of his order. In the pride of his youth he had worn it easily, but now it seemed heavy to him, the metal cold against his skin. They are larger than other ravens and more clever, bred to carry only the most important messages. This one came to tell us that the conclave has met, considered the reports and measurements made by maesters all over the realm, and declared this great summer done at last. 10 years, 2 turns, and 16 days it lasted, the longest summer in living memory. Again, there's like he's old, and he's like, ooh, this metal is creepy. Also, old people tend to get kind of cold, so there actually is a certain amount of like, this actually kind of makes sense that this isn't just a mental thing. It's like actually it may actually be colder than it was.
Yes. Hello, Otter. Welcome.
Oh, you made it. I feel like I'm late to class, college flashbacks. I've never thought of myself as a professor, but I am smarter than most professors, so that kind of makes sense. Wouldn't you agree, Lindbergh?
And humble. You forgot humble.
Um, Also, I just need to point out, I like the touch that summers and winters and autumns and whatever can last years, but it makes no goddamn sense. Like, in terms of the world building, the only way it makes sense is if they can still raise crops in winter. Otherwise, they would just all starve all the time, like every 10 years.
This is the fantasy in fantasy.
Yeah, but it's a fantasy that doesn't super make sense. Because again, the thing is, this is actually a big thing with how peasants made their crops, is that they made them so that, because the thing is, you can't actually store grain for more than about a year. So if winter lasts for more than about a year, you're real fucked. Like, there's not much to do. And also, you have to eat that grain even during the summertime as well, while the new plants are growing. So it's like, it just
Well,
doesn't.
you can make bread and you can freeze the loaves. Like it gets very cold in winter.
By the time you get there, though, you've lost um, the grain. Like the grain can't. Well, actually, I don't know. I don't. You are from the land of ice and snow, so you might know better. With the midnight wind blows.
Yeah, like winters were the great killer in Sweden. So
Yeah, there would also actually, one of the things about the world is that theoretically speaking, there should be more centralization and central control, because you would have the castle would become not just a means of defense, it would also become a shared granary that everybody needs to depend on in really difficult times, which is not really necessarily uh, representative of the Middle Ages, but that's like a minor thing.
hello,
It is
less
cool.
studies.
Hey, what's up? Magic grain. I
Little
mean, that's also
following
one of the other
disappeared.
things you would assume, is that this is maybe just grain that's used to this.
I mean, we should consider that before the first men arrived to Westeros, like it was inhabited by magical creatures, like the old ones.
Squirrel fairies.
Yes, so basically, men only really arrived here in a time where magic was part of the world, and this era we're seeing now in the books is sort of late era where magic is stagnating. So you could argue that people like winter is getting to be more and more of a threat for the people, and we don't really see it as such since we only get a sort of fisheye view of this little point in time.
Yeah, I mean,
So
that's a good
maybe
point.
maybe there was magic that helped with food and stock.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's not really as much of a problem because A Song of Ice and Fire doesn't have like a hard magic system. Do you need to take a call?
No.
Are you too busy for us?
No, it's just useless stuff. I thought I had turned off the
Okay.
sound, that's why.
Okay. Oh, they actually mentioned this. Okay. Will it get cold now? Shireen was a summer child and had never known true cold. In time, Master Cressen replied. If the gods are good, they will grant us a warm autumn and a bountiful harvest, so we might prepare for the winter to come. The small folks said there was a long summer meant. Sorry. The small folks said that a long summer meant an even longer winter, but the maester saw no reason to frighten the child with such tales. Patchface rang his bells. It's always summer under the sea, he intoned. The merwives wear anemones in their hair and weave gowns of silver seaweed. I know, oh, oh, oh. Shireen giggled. I would like a gown of silver seaweed. Under the sea it snows up, said the fool, and the rain is dry as bone. I know, oh, oh, oh. Will it truly snow? The child asked. Again, I don't like Patchface. It's not even that he's bad, he's just cringe. You know what I mean? Like, he's just cringe.
Pistolas, Will, pistolas.
It's hand crossbowless.
Oh yeah, crossbowlers. That's perfect. I really like that. Under the sea it snows up and the rain is dry as bone. Like, I like that incongruity of the things he says.
Yes, it
And
is. That is kind of interesting.
It's pretty dark. Like, this is a pretty sunny sort of interchange between the child and the old maester, and then Patchface is here to sort of make it a bit creepy. Like,
Yeah,
he is
and the
so
thing
creepy.
is, And the other thing is, he's almost like a Greek choir or a Greek chorus, where it's like the people are having an interaction, and then somebody off screen is just saying something very weird to create like an atmosphere. Like it almost has that kind of quality to it.
Hmm.
Will it truly snow? The child asked. It will, Cressen said, but not for years yet, I pray, and then not for long. Ah, here's Pylos with the bird. All right, you can read the next part.
Shireen gave a cry of delight. Even Cressen had to admit the bird made for an impressive sight, white as snow and larger than any hawk, with the bright black eyes that meant it was no mere albino, but a true-bred white raven of the citadel. Here, he called. The raven spread its wings, leapt into the air, and flapped noisily across the room to land on the table beside him. I'll see to your breakfast now, Pilot announced. Cressen nodded. This is the Lady Shireen, he told the raven. The bird bobbed its pale head up and down as if it were bound. Lady, it croaked. Lady.
Cressen is such a nice grandpa. It's very
Mm-hmm.
cute.
He is, and you can really see how he makes an effort because he thinks that Shireen is a
Yeah.
sad child, so he really, tries to magic up her life and comfort her, and he's just a very
Yeah.
nice old grandpa.
Yeah, I think that's one of the really endearing things about him. And one of the reasons that this chapter has the power that it does and what's going to happen at the end. Um all right. Let's see. We are going to probably need to hurry through some of this. So basically he's just talking about the white raven. Oh, okay. Well, no. Okay. This is the time Patchface is creepy. Clever man, clever fool, clever bird, said Patchface jangling. Began to sing, the shadows come to dance my lord, dance my lord, dance my lord. He sang, hopping from one foot to the other and back again. The shadows come to stay my lord, stay my lord, stay my lord. He jerked his head with each word, the bells in his antlers sending up a clangor. And later
You
in
can
this
just
book, we'll learn about the shadows.
Yes, and just imagine the picture of him just winging his head while he's dancing and singing.
Again, in this like absurd Greek chorus.
Hmm. I think this is really, really nice foreshadowing.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it's
it very
also
much is.
the sort of foreshadowing that you notice the second or third time you read the book. And that is the thing with Martin, like he leaves Easter eggs everywhere. And that's why you can reread his books so many times. And I personally, this is just a preference. I love that. I love the author just giving me a little bit more if I pay
hmm
more attention.
Well, and the thing is, there's a dividends to paying more attention, and it's also like you get rewards for engaging with the work, and trying to see more in it, and I think that's also one of the things that kind of helps keep his fandom on life support even 30 years later, when soon he will be on life support.
I am dead. I'm I'm dead. Like this
Uh,
is this is the great heartbreak of my life.
and the thing is, he said he's not going to let someone else finish it, which is such bullshit. Like,
Yeah, like what the fuck, George? Why don't you want us to be happy?
and he's just making all these TV shows. I think they're filming the pilot for Night of the Seven Kingdoms. I think they
I
just started.
think I think Martin should let
No, not
Scott
Sanderson.
Backer finish it.
Oh, I was gonna say, if you say Sanderson, I swear to
No, he
God, we will
wrote
stop being friends.
Darkness That Comes Before.
Oh, R. Scott Baker.
R. Scott Baker, yes, and he's got the right sort of vibes and prose that he could finish this if he just got all the material right.
Yeah, and he could create like a fairly good. I don't know though, because Martin is very much, they say like a discovery writer, and he's talked about this. So so much would probably change from his initial plan that you'd never really be able to see a full version of it. But also some kind of an ending would be very nice. So,
Hmm.
um, okay. Yeah, he
Let's.
thinks then about how he might have killed Patchface, because Patchface basically had brain damage from almost being drowned.
Yes.
Again, Fallen Splendor is again kind of the Fallen Splendor dash taupe cripples kind of is kind of the theme of this chapter.
Yes, and then he thinks about the letter that announced Stannis and Robert's parents' death, like their ship sunk off the coast of Storm's End.
Yeah, and that's something that very much defines the three Baratheon brothers. Um, No one had ever taught Stannis how to laugh, least of all the boy Patchface. The storm came up suddenly howling, and Shipwrecker Bray proved okay. So this is the first time he mentions Stannis, and Stannis is like his surrogate son, essentially. And he also feels like, oh, I wish I could have been there more for Stannis. Like
Yeah,
Cressen really does take on a
yeah, the
certain amount of
sadness in this
responsibility.
that no one had ever taught Stannis how to laugh, and it's
Hmm.
such a sad rumination of. You can tell that he kind of thinks that there was an opportunity, but it was lost.
Yeah, exactly. Like if something went wrong. This is not Dragonstone is not for people where their life went the way they thought it would.
No.
100 Ordsman. Okay, Bosch. Okay, this is just backstory to Patchface, which is like kind of interesting, I suppose. I guess it's important in terms of the greater novel, and it's not too slow here, and it is kind of interesting. In
Yes,
its own
but
right.
it's not essential.
Yes.
Mm.
And let me see.
And then he
Oh,
sings more. The shadows come to dance.
yeah, and Crescent also might have killed him, or was thinking of killing him with the cup milk of the poppy, but like didn't do it. And so Crescent from a very young age had pressures to poison people. That will come into play in a little bit. Um, let's see. Pylos strode through the door. Maester pardons. You have forgotten the porridge, Crescent said, amused. That was most unlike Pylos. Again, this is just binds them together as like, oh, they're people, and also Crescent's a little funny. Like they do have a working relationship though. Maester, Sir Davos returned last night. They were talking of it in the kitchen. I thought you would want to know at once. Davos, last night you say? Where is he? With the king. They have been together most of the night. There was a time when Lord Stannis would have woke him no matter the hour to have him there to give his counsel. I should have been told, Crescent complained. I should have been woken. He disentangled his fingers from Shireen's. Pardon, my lady, but I must speak with your lord father. Pylos, give me your arm. There are too many steps in this castle, and it seems they add a few every night just to vex me. Again, it's sad, because, like, the thing about Stannis' attitude toward Cressen is that, like, you kind of understand Stannis as, like, he's just an old guy, like, I feel bad for him, but, like, Cressen doesn't want to be left behind in that way, and definitely feels like responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Castles are not friendly places for the frail. In case you guys haven't noticed, Cressen is old. Ba, ba, ba. Oh, okay, so this is where they see that this is where they explain that there's a bunch of ships and that nobody is allowed to leave Dragonstone, like Stannis is building a private army. This is important to the geopolitical situation. So it's also, I should say that I have this screen really display options as very large. Really, it's more like the paragraphs are more like this size. Like we're getting a little bit of sense of these things lasting a longer time than they are because of the format.
Mm-hmm. That is actually one point that is very different from the book and the TV show. Like in the book, Stannis' sellsword army, it plays a much bigger role, whereas in the book, suddenly he just has lots of soldiers.
Well, he gets he Stannis makes the most of the soldiers he has. That's the thing. Stannis is always complaining that people don't like him, but he's able to be like his soldiers are all very loyal to him, and he's always able to use them very well outside of like the Blackwater battle. But
Mhm.
it's one of those things about Stannis that you kind of notice on a reread.
Yeah, he's just this sweet, grumpy child. Like, you can kind of tell how he's self-conscious in everything he does. So he's like, I can't inspire loyalty like Robert could. They loved Robert. And then they're like, he's got so many good, loyal men, but he feels isn't the man Robert was. So he doesn't really see that.
Yeah,
He
he
loves that.
he has very second child syndrome.
Mm-hmm. He does.
And As a second
And his
child,
brothers were kind of cruel to him as well. Martin sneaks it in here and there that he was the child that everyone kind of ragged on.
No, his brothers were very shitty to him, and actually, he also just had two very shitty children. Like that's the thing, or siblings. Like neither Robert or Renly are good people. They're both pretty terrible people, and so like that's kind of an interesting psychology of his. Oh, and this is where we meet Davos Seaworth as he's going up some stairs. Davos is going to be one of our viewpoint characters, so he's really not in the TV show a ton. No, he is. He has this thing where like they run out of things for him to do, so he just kind of hangs out as a guy
He
with an
hangs.
accent.
He hangs around on the wall, and they invented some sort of rivalry between him and Melisandre. And
Oh God, that was so stupid.
I mean, there
Yeah.
is antagonism between them. Like Davos thinks she is evil. Well, that her god is evil.
Yeah,
It was a weird tangent to go for.
yeah. The show.
It was also
often-
very unrealistic. Like they made this whole thing about Shireen, and yeah.
Oh God, well, let's not even get started on that whole.
No,
shit
no,
of-
no. Let's not talk about it. It didn't happen. Okay, it didn't happen.
If you guys would like to see me and Limburg hate watch Game of Thrones, let us know in the comments.
Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire lovers reacting to a Game of Thrones TV show, and just a picture of us with those most disgusted faces, like.
Yeah, exactly. I would just have those. That would be perfect. I'd do Maria faces. Okay. Davos was a slight man, his low birth written plain upon a common face. A well-worn green cloak, stained by salt and spray and faded from the sun, draped his thin shoulders. Over brown doublet and breeches that matched brown eyes and hair. About his neck, a patch of worn leather hung from a thong. His small beard was well peppered with gray, and he wore a leather glove on his maimed left hand. When he saw Cressen, he checked his descent. Martin really likes to talk about clothes, people have said before, and like that doesn't bother me as much as some other people because it's like, okay, it's pretty quick.
He really loves his clothes and his food. Like he loves describing what they eat. And I love
that's
it,
true.
but I guess that some people just think it's tears because they don't really care about the detail. They just see it as generic medieval clothes and generic medieval food, but I like the detail.
Well, here it's tying into his character, mouched with brown eyes and hair, draped on his thin shoulders, and like the whole thing about this
Yes.
is Davos is very plain looking, so it ties in, and it's also short.
Yes.
Later on, he'll describe like fish and pheasants and crusts, and I'm like, okay, that's a bit much, Martin. You're
Yes,
hungry. We
but
get it.
with Davos and with a lot of the clothes descriptions, it is both a statement to the character's personality and their station in life. So we can immediately see that Davos is humble. He is not dressed in finery. He's dressed in simple garments with simple materials.
And then the beard with peppered gray gives you a good sense of his age.
Yeah.
Sir Davos, the maester said, when did you return? In the black of morning, my favorite time. It was said that no one had ever handled a ship by night half so well as Davos Shorthand. Before Lord Stannis had knighted him, he had seen the most notorious and elusive smuggler in all the Seven Kingdoms. And the man shook his head. It was you who... It is as you warned him. They will not rise, maester. Not for him. They do not love him. No, Cressen thought, nor will they ever. He is strong, able, just, just past the point of wisdom. Yet it is not enough. It has never been enough. You spoke to them all? And then this is also tying into, Stannis is also one of the key points of Martin's arguments about the aesthetics of chivalry versus the reality of it, in that, like, they loved Robert because Robert fit their idea of what a king looked like, and they don't love Stannis because Stannis doesn't really look like what they want.
But possibly also they don't want to rise against the Lannisters.
Yeah, that's the other thing, is that no, there's a lot of political considerations involved in terms of like these houses are, and I mean the thing is like,
everyone would rise against the Lannisters if they could be sure they win. But that's the thing. No one at this point, no one is absolutely sure who will win. So everyone is
Right.
thinking and crossing their fingers like thrice before they make any alliances.
yeah, exactly. It's like, or what is it, the the Fossilways who always send one son to one side of a civil war and another son to the other side of the civil war in case they
That
work.
was Swan in these books.
Oh, is that what it is? Yeah, there's one family
Yeah.
that does that a lot.
Balin's father sent Balin stayed with the Lannisters, and his brother went with Stannis.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah, okay, so this is a lot of just explaining the uh, political situation of what's going on. There is this point about
Yeah.
Renly, the
Can
Rainbow
we?
Guard. Yeah, you can read this part.
Uh, um,
Yeah, Martin likes his Easter eggs.
yeah. The Rainbow Guard? Renly is made his own Kingsguard. The one-time smuggler explained, but these 7 don't wear white. Each one has his own colours. Loras Tyrell is their Lord Commander. It was just a sort of notion that would appeal to Renly Baratheon, a splendid new order of knighthood with gorgeous new raiment to proclaim it. Even as a boy, Renly had loved bright colours and rich fabrics, and he had loved his games as well. "Look at me," he would shout as he ran laughing through the halls of Storm's End. "Look at me, I'm a dragon!" Or "Look at me, I'm a wizard!" Or look at me, I'm the rain god!" The bold little boy with black hair and laughing eyes was a man grown now, 21, and he still played his games. "Look at me, I'm a king," Cressen thought sadly. "Oh, Renly, sweet dear child, do you know what you are doing? And would you care even if you did? Is there anyone who cares for him but me?" "What reasons did the Lord give for their refusals?" he asked Sir Davos. Bah.
Yeah, so I really like this because it tells you a lot about Renly. Because again, we didn't really meet Renly too much in the first book, so this is setting up one of the major political players. It's setting
Yeah.
up the kind of tragedy of the Baratheon brothers. Of like, oh, Renly's kind of shitty, but Cressen remembers him as a child. Again, there's also that whole he's old thing going on.
In a Game of Thrones, we just saw Renly for comic relief, like when he laughs at Joffrey after he loses Lion's Tooth in the river.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, and then there's also the part where he's like, he goes to Ned Stark and is like, "Hey, let's rebel," and Ned's like, "No," and you're like, okay, all right.
Yeah, and he's like,
Yeah,
I'm gonna fuck off then.
I'm gonna fuck off and go marry my
yeah, so this is
my
just
Tyrell
one more
bride.
brick in the wall that is Renly. So you kind of see how he has this light-hearted attitude, how he takes pretty much nothing seriously, but also how he likes to aggrandize himself.
Yeah, and this line I had missed, but it's actually very interesting. Is there anyone who cares for him but me? Kind of implying that like they're all kind of using him or help furthering his kind of fantasy. And like that's such a caring old man thought. It's not really explored more in the novel in terms of like Renly really isn't a puppet. He really is doing his own thing. But it's a nice little way also of how somebody might go like, oh, that person's not a bad person. It's just, they're druggy friends that are influencing them to become king of the Seven Kingdoms, like that kind of a thought.
Yeah, he's sort of lamenting that that all of Stannis's brothers sort of just trampled all over him.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Maester Cressen remembered that day, the day that Davos had been knighted, after the siege of Storm's End. Lord Stannis and a small garrison had held the castle for close to a year against the graced host of the Lord Tyrells and Redwine. So again, this is something where it's like, people like Stannis if he withstood a like, you know what I mean? Like his garrison didn't break, and that's actually very difficult for a child to do. So it's another example of how like people actually do like Stannis. He just doesn't really notice it. It's also a very nice characterizing moment of like, this is who Stannis is. He is strong and brittle. Yeah. Blah blah blah. Then there's all the stuff about Davos and Stannis. This is mostly,
we probably know
setting
Davos'
up.
story, that he was a smuggler and he helped Stannis by delivering onions, a ship with onions. And Stannis has shortened his fingers as a He knighted him as for his service, and he shortened his fingers for the smuggling, and that is also very telling of Stannis' sense of justice.
The good does not wash away the bad, which I actually I think is a very nice philosophy in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You atone for the ill you did, even if you do something good.
Yeah. And it's this is actually all very interesting as well, and doesn't slow down the chapter too much. And also, again, it's really important to know who Davos is. Sir Davos, truth can be a bitter draught, even for a man like Lord Stannis. He thinks only of returning to King's Landing in the fullness of his power to tear down his enemies and claim what is rightfully his. Yet now, if he takes this meager host to King's Landing, it will be only to die. He does not have the numbers. I told him as much, but you know his pride. Davos held up his gloved hand. My fingers will grow back before that man bends to sense. That's funny. The old man sighed. You have done all you could. Now I must add my voice to yours. Warily, he resumed his climb. Okay. There's the painted table. Oh, okay. Seated in the chair was a man in a tight-laced leather jerkin and breeches of rough spun brown wool. When Maester Cressen entered, he glanced up. I knew you would come, old man, whether I summoned you or no. There was no hint of warmth in his voice. There seldom was. And this is Stannis.
Yes, and this is the king wearing leather and rough spun and wool.
Yeah, and so again, this is a place where like the clothes are actually important. They're telling you something about the character.
Yeah, very specifically about Stannis, because he is the king. Like, all the other kings we have seen have been sort of swathed in velvet and brocade and just really fine materials, and here sits Stannis.
Yeah, just chilling on his own. I think also the thing about it is I remember from when I read this initially, Stannis comes off as very colder
Sour.
in this chapter than he will in others. Yeah, like he's a little bit mean in this chapter, and I wonder if that's a function of early story writing being weird, if it's a function of of Cressen's viewpoint on Stannis, or if it's a function just of that's what Stannis has to be a little bit cold and weird in this chapter for the chapter to function.
Yes, but also I feel like Martin has a kind of way of finding the essence of the character and sort of exaggerating them just a little bit in the sort of introductory chapter for the character, because until now we have only heard about Stannis, we have never seen him. So I think
that's a good point.
Kind of a device to sort of cement his character, and then as we go on we sort of unfold Stannis like he's a precious flower, and we'll see what's under the next petal underneath.
A brittle metal flower. I'm gonna sneeze, so I'm gonna mute myself.
The iron flower. The steel flower would have sounded nicer, but
I think it's the old.
What you get.
Yeah, I was gonna say Donos the or not Donos. I forget what his name is. The blacksmith is like, yeah, he's the brittle steel, which or the brittle iron, which that's not really true of iron, but whatever.
Oh yeah, you mean at the wall?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
John talks to.
Yeah, you can go ahead and read this part.
Okay. Stannis Baratheon, Lord of Dragonstone, and by the grace of the gods rightful heir to the Iron Throne of the Seven Kingdoms of Westeros, was broad of shoulder and sinew of limb, with a tightness to his face and flesh that spoke of leather cured in the sun. Until it was tough as steel. Hard was the word men used when they spoke of Stannis, and hard he was. Though he was not yet 35, only a fringe of thin black hair remained on his head, circling behind his ears like the shadow of a crown. His brother, the late King Robert, had grown a beard in his final years. Maester Cressen had never seen it, but they said it was a wild thing, thick and fierce. As if in answer, Stannis kept his own whiskers cropped tight and short. They lay like a blue-black shadow across his square jaw and the bony hollows of his cheeks. His eyes were open wounds beneath his heavy brows, as blue and dark as the sea by night. His mouth would have given despair to even the drollest of fools. It was a mouth made for frowns and scowls and sharply worded commands, all thin pale lips and clenched muscles, a mouth that had forgotten how to smile and had never known how to laugh. Sometimes, when the world grew very still and silent of a night, Mr. Cressen fancied he could hear Lord Stannis grinding his teeth half a castle away.
Okay, this is such a good character description. So
It's so
first of
good.
all, there's some good sensory details in there, but it's also like it's clever and it tells you so much about him. One thing I've always loved, there's two things about Stannis I've always loved. The first is that he's balding, and that's such a great like middle-aged man problem to have of like I don't want to bald, but my body is kind of betraying me a bit. I also always loved grinding his teeth because that's such a like it's again this kind of like frustrated child thing to do. I also like
Absolutely.
the comparison of his beard to Robert's is very nice. It again tells you kind of both who Stannis is, but also again the comparison
Mm-hmm.
between the Baratheon brothers. That's going to be a key part of this book.
Yes, the beard is a very good illustration of their characters. Like Robert was wild and what's the word?
Effusive and
When
yeah,
you
he
give
was
in to
very
temptation, what's that word?
oh
I don't know, lusty, for lack of a better. Whereas
yeah. No,
Stannis
Lusty
is
is good.
pulled back, he's tight, he is repressed. And that
Yes.
also manifests in his grinding of teeth. Like everything about Stannis is measured and repressed. He is the clenched fist. I'm clenching my fist.
That is very no, it's true, and he's gonna fist the Seven Realms. Yeah, it's really great. I also really like made for frowns and scowls and sharply worded commands, all thin, pale lips and clenched muscles. Like that's such a good like you can see it.
Mhm.
And like yeah, no, it's good.
And
This
with
is
Stannis's character archetype, it would be so easy for him to be just a cliche, big, brooding man, sort of
mm-hmm.
ultra masculine. But then Martin gives him these characteristics that sort of almost, lessen him
Yeah, they undercut
in a
it. Again, that's
sense.
the thing about the balding head is that Stannis would kind of like to be that tough guy, but he's not quite there. There's a little bit of whininess under the surface. And so like yeah, it's
Oh,
always undercut a little bit. But you get the sense that he finds it unfair that the world is undercutting him in that way.
yes, Chris, hedonistic is a very good word for Robert.
Yeah. Um Once you would have woken me, the old man said. Once you were young, now you are old and sick and need your sleep. Stannis had never learned to soften his speech, to dissemble or flatter. He had said what he thought, and those that did not like it could be damned. I knew you'd learn that Davos had to say soon enough. What Davos had to say soon enough. You always do, don't you? I would be of no help to you if I did not, Cressen said. I met Davos on the stair. And he told all, I suppose? I should have had the man's tongue shortened along with his fingers. He would have made you a poor envoy then. So there's something here that I didn't really notice the first time I read it. Stannis is coming off as really mean, but this is almost like how he jokes with people. Like he has
Oh,
a very
yes,
brutal way of joking,
he
and
is
like you can see
so
how he
deadpan.
yeah, exactly. He's like, "Oh God, you're so annoying," but again, there's almost not a warmth, but a familiarity there on reread
Yeah,
that I didn't feel
yeah,
the
the
first time.
shorten the tongue, that is clearly a Stannis joke, and unless you know what character Stannis has, you'll read it as, really grumpy and mean.
Hmm.
But he's really joking.
Yeah, you always do, don't you? That's also very like I know who you are and you're a pain, but like said in
Hmm.
such a brutal way.
Yeah, you just show up everywhere. I don't even call for you.
Okay. Yeah, more political situation. He's annoyed. All of the good ones have already risen for Renly. You're Lord. You're okay. You go and read this part. I think because I do think it's relevant.
Who's speaking? Is it? Your brother has been the Lord of Storm's End these past 13 years. These lords are his sworn bannermen. His, Stannis broke him, when by rights they would be mine. I never asked for Dragonstone. I never wanted it. I took it because Robert's enemies were here, and he
Oh,
commanded me to root them out.
really quickly. Where in Ireland do you think it is that Stannis is from?
That is not Ireland.
I'm sorry. I'll try to. I'm not gonna roast your voices, but I just had to that one time. Go ahead.
That isn't Ireland.
Scotland, Ireland, the not England one.
No, 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 no. No, that's a Scotland. That's a Scotland, we will.
All right, go ahead.
I totally lost my way now.
Robert's enemies were here, and he commanded me to root them out.
I built his fleet and did his work, dutiful as a brother, when he should be to an elder, as Renly would have been to me. And what was Robert's thanks? He names me Lord of Dragonstone and give me Storm's End and his incomes to Renly. Storm's End belonged to House Baratheon for 300 years. By right, it should have been passed to me when Robert took the Iron Throne.
So again, there's this like a great sense of just a grievance that Stannis has, which again, I think the thing is like once you like Stannis, this is all actually very funny. But I think initially,
you can hear the jealousy of Renly. Like, he is clearly jealous of Renly because Renly got everything. Everyone adores Renly. He's young and handsome. But also, this is a real grievance. Like, Robert should have given Storm's End to Stannis.
Well, so, okay, here's the thing, and I don't know if they bring this up in the chapter, but I read it in a political discussion of it, is that Dragonstone is the, like, symbol of the Targaryens and their legitimacy, and so Robert actually really must have trusted Stannis to hold this place and to make it a Baratheon stronghold and keep, Daenerys and Viserys from coming back across the sea. So Stannis interprets this as Robert dissing him, but there actually may have been a certain amount of respect that, or at least belief that Stannis could do this thing.
Yes, but Robert could also have given him more ways of income. Like, Robert could have helped him out a little bit. Because Dragonstone isn't what it was.
Yeah, no, and it's they say that here. Dragonstone is small and people, and you're not gonna. The funny thing is that the first like third of this book builds up so much Stannis's plight as completely helpless that later when he gets all of Renly's knights, you're like, wow, that was such a fucking twist. Like I had no idea how he was gonna get out of that situation, and that's one of the reasons it's a good reversal. Robert did you an injustice, Maester Cressen replied carefully. Oh, here, let me do a voice. Yeah, he didn't know of sound reasons. Dragonstone had been long the seat of House Targaryen. He needed a man's strength to rule here, and Renly was but a child. That was my Limburg impression. Yeah, so he does bring that up, but...
Guys, help me. Will is being mean.
I'm bullying the Swedish girl. The poor rural peasant.
Yeah, you're bullying the poor foreigner for their accents. Does that make you feel big and powerful, eh?
Look, English is the Queen's tongue, and you have no right to it. Hold on, my mom's coming back tonight, so I gotta check hers. Okay.
I'm just drinking coffee.
Okay.
I'll just pour coffee on me.
You okay? By now it shouldn't be hot, right?
Yeah. No, it's fine.
Okay. He's just dissing Renly. I ask you, why did the gods inflict me with brothers? Cannot answer for the gods. You seldom answer at all these days, it seems to me. Okay, so again, this is Martin's like little witticisms, where I struggle so much to describe it, and I've never been able to figure out what it is. He says it's almost like a little bit of wordplay. How they'll say something, and then the other person will add on to that in like a little bit of a. Again, I'm never going to be able to find the right word for it, but
Joe Abercrombie is really good at this too. He's really good at writing dialogue where it kind of flows together in that perfect synchronicity that people just don't really have in real life. Like, people have really good and snappy comebacks or offhand comments that people make.
Yeah, no, and like in real life, you're lucky if you get like one of those a year, and you're always like, yes, that was so perfect. You say don't answer at all these days. It seems to me who maesters for Renly. Perchance I should send for him. I might like his counsel better. What do you think this maester said when my brother decided to steal my crown? What counsel did your colleagues offer to this traitor blood of mine? It would surprise me if Lord Renly sought counsel, your grace. The youngest of Lord Stephen's 3 sons had grown into a man bold but heedless, who acted from impulse than from calculation. It's interesting because, like, this is so mean, and yet Cressen is also not having a lot of a reaction to it, which, as you as the reader, this would be much worse if Cressen was like acting like he got hit. But you're like, he's kind of used to it, so you don't tend
But
to
also,
react.
I feel like Cressen understands Stannis' humor.
Yeah, I'm not. This comes off. Some parts of this come off as funny, and other parts come off as like just mean. But I think that's a sort of I do think that's kind of a line that Martin is playing, is that this is Stannis at like his worst. Also.
Yeah, and
this is
the
his most
traitor blood of
caustic.
mine. Like, Stannis is disagreeable, and either you as a person, you will appreciate how straightforward he is, or you will think he's just being mean.
Yeah, no, that's true. Also, that actually is a good point. It depends on how much you yourself are like, oh, okay,
Yeah, how much
I like when people are
weight you put at
straightforward.
these words.
Yeah,
Because he says things that are kind of true.
It is interesting, actually, and you may have a different opinion on that being Swedish, but like it was something I remember reading once where there's 2 kinds of cultures that you see across other cultures, which is ask culture and like tell culture, which is like if somebody is going, if you say to somebody, hey, do you want to come over tomorrow? There's the 2 people will be like, one person will be like, no, and that's not rude in their culture. Like you just say no, and like because you didn't want to, and there's no implied insult. Whereas other people will be like, oh, well, I'll have to see about my schedule, because they don't want to, but it would be rude to say no. So depending on which side of that culture you're on, you might see Stannis as more rude or not, because he is just saying what he thinks.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, certain cultures are more like that than others. Okay. He's just being salty more. Your true enemies are the Lannisters, my lord, Maester Cressen answered. If you and your brother were to make common cause against them, I will not treat with Renly, Stannis answered in a tone that brooked no argument. Not while he calls himself a king. The thing about it, okay, so this is another thing that when you're reading the book, you're like, man, why doesn't everybody, like, gang up against the Lannisters who are the real bad guys? And, like, there's an extent to which that's kind of correct. But also, like, something that the show doesn't get, because the show casts Renly as, like, a pretty good dude and Stannis as the bad one, but, like, Renly is trying to destabilize the entire feudal system that exists.
He's usurping the crown. Like, the given trajectory should have been that Renly adds his voice to Stannis, and together they crush the Lannisters. But instead, Renly is a big man-child who's like, I can be a king. I can be a better king than Stannis. Let's go be king.
And literally every single property inheritance in Westeros is based off of primogeniture. Once you at the top say, hey, that doesn't actually really matter, then you have a problem where, like, all of society, why does that matter for them? And like, yes, your word actually matters a lot in a medieval context. And so, like, Renly is sort of an existential threat almost to the whole culture.
He's an anarchist, basically, because he should know that what he does is going to destabilize everything, and it's going to create this whole big grab for power situation, which will end up getting lots of people killed. If he had just risen for Stannis, it would be a done deal. And the only reason to why Renly thinks this is a good idea is because I'm great. I'm awesome. I should be king.
And I don't want to play second fiddle, even though I could still marry the Tyrells and have like a suit. Like, the thing is, it's not like Stannis was going to impoverish Renly. Like, Renly, because he could bring so much weight of power to Stannis, would have a lot of power in his administration, so to speak, and a lot of influence. There's no real reason he needs to be king to have like a good time of it.
No, he just wants to be king.
Yeah, exactly. He's like,
handsome, benign, just, and all those things he says to
that's the funniest
Catelyn
part.
to justify why.
Yeah, and the thing is, again, this is where Martin is kind of questioning the idea of the medieval, or interrogating them of like, okay, why does the system work this way instead of that way? Is it right that the not best suited king should become king? That kind of a thing. Okay, then there's stuff about the Lannister or the Starks. Oh, I always thought this was sad. Why should I? You go ahead and read this part.
Why should I avenge Eddard Stark? The man was nothing to me. Oh, Robert loved him, to be sure. Loved him as a brother. Often did I hear that. I was his brother, not Ned Stark, but you would never have known it by the way it treated me. I held Storm's End for him, watched good men starve while Mace Tyrell and Paxter Redwine feasted within the sight of my walls. Did Robert thank me? No, he thanked Stark for lifting the siege when we were down to rats and radishes. I built a fleet for Robert's command, took Dragonstone in his name. Did he take my hand and say, well done, brother, whatever would I do without you? No, he blamed me for letting Willem Darry steal away Viserys and the babe. And I, as if I could have stopped it. I sat on his council for 15 years, helping Jon Arryn rule his realm while Robert drank and whored. But when John died, did my brother make me hand? No, he went galloping off to his dear friend Ned Stark and offered him the honour, and small good it did either of them.
So I always thought this was kind of sad because like Stannis and Ned could have been really good buddies. Like they both have a very sense of noblesse oblige and being following the law and stuff. And like Ned
Their
is just like a
mindset
slight
is so close. Like
yeah
they should have been. They are more brothers than Stannis and Robert was, but Robert favoured Ned because he grew up
yeah
with Ned.
yeah, and
And
that's kind of one of
so,
the sad things about it.
yeah.
Yeah,
And so
and
Stannis was forever alienated from Robert and Ned.
yeah, and the other thing is that Robert really should have named Stannis Hand of the King, like from a
Yeah,
political perspective. A,
yeah.
you should not piss off people who are close to you in terms of your constituency, but also like Stannis actually knew the political situation, whereas Ned had no idea really what was going on at the Capitol and had no personal connections
Yes.
with the people there. And so like,
Yeah.
Stannis would have made such a better hand, but
He
that
would have
was
made
Robert.
a good
Robert did
hand,
things out of
and also
sentimentality.
Ned would not have been sour that he wasn't named hand, because Ned
Yeah,
wasn't interested in the southern politics anyway. But
yeah,
Robert
no,
was a very selfish king.
yeah, it's actually it's very true, and the way Robert made decisions was just not political; it was emotional, and he wanted his brother with him. He trusted Ned in a way he trusted John Arrington. Uh, okay, be that as it may, my lord, Master Cressen said gently, great wrongs have been done to you, but the past is dust. The future may yet be won if you join with the Starks. There are others you might sound out as well. What of Lady Arryn? If the Queen murdered her husband, surely she would want justice for him. She has a young son, John Arryn's heir. If you were to betroth Shireen to him, the boy is weak and sickly, Lord Stannis objected. Even his father saw how it was when he asked me to foster him on Dragonstone. Serve as a page might have done him good, but that damnable Lannister woman had Lord Arryn poisoned before it could be done, and now Lysa hides him in the Eyrie Tower. She'll never part with the boy, I promise you that. Um, so, yeah, no, there's more political stuff. Uh, you must send Shireen to the area, the Maester urged. Dragonstone is a grim home for a child. Again, very grandfatherly. Um,
It's also the first kind of hint of the fact that Stannis is lessened by his lack of a male heir. And even if Shireen, as a girl, was a good commodity, usually to trade and gain political influence, she is sort of tarnished by her bout with Grayscale. Like,
yeah,
a lot of
it's
people have prejudice against those children.
yeah, it's another way the gods have cursed him. Essentially, is like how he would see it, and it's true that in a medieval context, he doesn't have an heir to really give his inheritance to, and like that's actually just politically weaker. And there's not a sense really that, and especially for Stannis, who like A is a little sexist, and B is very just traditional in his gender roles and how he sees it. And
It's
so we see,
also a bit weaker because traditionally Shireen's children would take their father's name. And in order to keep his lands and holdings in the Baratheon name, he would have to do lots of political shenanigans to try and get someone to agree to have their son's children not bear their son's name, which was difficult.
Yeah, it just wouldn't. It's a very disadvantageous situation for him to be in. And so here's the thing. We start getting like, okay, he's like, oh, okay, maybe you got a good point here. Familiar and hideous, Stannis frowned his brown thought. Still, perhaps it was worth the trying. This tells you that Stannis actually is fairly willing to listen to Cressen. And then we have, must the rightful lord of the Seven Kingdoms beg for help from widow women and usurpers? A woman's voice asks sharply. Maester Cressen turned
Why
about
is
his head.
Stannis' wife American?
Must the lord of the City Kingdoms beg help from widow women and usurpers? There, is that better? Okay, so basically, like, Lady Celis is his wife. She's real fugly. And we get a situation where, like, she kind of nags at him, essentially. And, like, you get a sense of, again, of Stannis as somebody who really wants to be powerful and cool, but, like, is constantly being dragged down by these small things.
Yeah, and the marriage is so loveless.
Yeah, that's the other thing, is that, like, it just does not work. And then we get Stannis' view on the Red Woman. Your God can keep his grace, said Lord Stannis, who did not share his wife's fervent new faith. It's swords I need, not blessings. Do you have an army hidden somewhere that you've not told me of? There was no affection in his tone. Again, the book does a lot to set up that Stannis is in, like, a really hopeless situation. Okay. How many swords will the... So you really also get a sense that, like, okay, these fanatics are going to make him do a wrong decision. Like, this is not going to lead well.
Yeah, in Stannis' position, he is very right in questioning the Lord of Light, because a lot, like all the people who do support him currently, most of them will be followers of the old gods. Well, the seven gods, not the old gods, but the seven gods, the traditional gods of the Southern Lands. So in order for him to cast off them, but not gain any new swords, it's a risky decision, and Stannis is, if anything, measured.
Yes, and he is very, again, he's actually quite good at managing people. He kind of knows instinctively what people are going to take and what they aren't. Yes. I'm going to skip through some of this just because what I want to get to is
the feast.
Yes. Oh, okay, no, but this is important. Davos would tell you different, Stannis said. The swords are sworn to Renly. They love my charming young brother as they once loved me, and they've never loved me. Yes, she answered, but if Renly should die... Stannis looked at his lady with narrowed eyes until Cressen could not hold his tongue. It is not to be thought, your grace. Whatever follies Renly has committed... Follies? I call them treasons. Stannis turned back to his wife. My brother is young and strong, and he has a vast host around him and these rainbow knights of his. Melisandre has gazed into the flames and seen him dead. Cressen was horror-struck. Fratricide. My lord, this is evil, unthinkable. Please listen to me. Yeah, so this is the beginning of Stannis's, like, if I need to get power, how much am I willing to bend? What am I willing to sacrifice in terms of my morals to get there? And then this also is going to motivate Cressen for, like, the second half of this chapter and make you go like, okay, yeah, we got to kill that red bitch. Like,
but also the suggestion that Melisandre has already seen it happen, it sort of suggests that it's already fated, which in Stannis' mind makes the leap smaller, because even though he resents his brothers, he is not the kind of snake who will just kill them for profit.
It's true, and the thing is, technically, Stannis is in the right here, in that, like, yeah, Renly is committing treason. He should either be killed or sent to the wall. Like, that's really what should happen here if he's not willing to, in some way, yield. And so, but, Cressen is an old man. He remembers
So far as claim goes, Stannis has the best claim.
Well, okay, so the thing is, technically, yes, but again, there's that whole issue of, like, not everybody knows that Joffrey is incest baby, but Renly has
No.
no claim. That's
Yeah,
the thing,
Renly
is
has
Renly has
no
no
claim
claim.
at all, except being
Uh,
a fatuous bitch. So
we
he's
are
got it
so much
coming.
Renly salt or tea in this. We
I,
could
th- I
actually,
don't I don't hate Renly. I think he's amusing, but I think Stannis is in the right.
he is again, and again, if you think about this as a destabilization of society thing, like Renly really does not have
Yeah,
a
how
leg to
many
stand on.
people perished in the battle of the Black Sea? No, the battle of
Water,
the
the
Blackwater.
Blackwater.
Yeah, how many people perished there? How many people perished in the Northern War? Like, how much death did this
Mm-hmm.
vain boy caused simply because he wanted a crown and not just to be a prince?
Yeah, exactly. Like it really would have changed the entire course of the
Hey,
series
Kisan.
if she Limburg has cats that she talks to in Swedish. It's very funny. Can we get a view of the cat, or are they not a pick upable one? Oh, is that gunpowder? He's very cute. Careful.
And the cat
Okay.
is gone.
All right. I'm gonna rush through some of this because again, I just want to get to the ending part, because we've already been doing this for about an hour and a half. Um.
Yeah.
He basically just talks about Melisandre. She's come across the sea, and like gonna try. She thinks Stannis is like the prophet Azor Ahai, or what is it? How is it pronounced?
Azor Ahai.
Azor Ahai. And also, for some reason, Cressen just has some poison hanging around. I don't know why. I mean, they explain why, but like, it's very weird that he just has them hanging around.
Well, all maesters
Um,
have poisons around because they also have the poison antidotes. And I think a lot of the maesters sort
oh,
of mildly dose themselves to gain resistance to poisons as well.
I don't
Because
remember. You
they
may be
are
correct though.
kind of the doctors of the realm. And how do you find antidotes to poisons? But also they are political players. Like, it's not the first time Cressen has considered poisoning someone.
Yes, no, that is very true. Also, there's never a moment where Crescent thinks like, "Oh, I'm gonna murder that bitch." But you have the setting up of him, his emotion. He already has the motivation, and he has the means, and now he's having the "I must rest." Crescent told himself, "I must have all my strength come dark. My hands must not shake, nor my courage flag. It is a dreadful thing I do, yet it must be done. If there are gods, surely they will forgive me him." Or forgive me. So we get a sense of like, oh, we know where this is going, without him actually thinking about the moral implications of it and thinking through it in the way that a lot of first-person point of views tend to be very navel-gazy, um,
And
which I like.
he thinks, like, I don't know how clear it is yet, but his motivation for killing Melisandre is that he thinks she will lead Stannis to ruin, basically.
Yeah, she's a bad influence.
Yeah, because
She's
he objects to the murdering of Renly, but it's not just a personal stand. It's not just, oh, her god is evil either, because Cressen isn't very religious, as we see.
mm-hmm.
The gods, if there are any indeed. But he has this very strong sense of dread, as we've seen, for Melisandre, and the sort of change that she urges, the sort of fervor that she urges people to have, because we all know that political and religious fervor can kind of lose sense and reason.
No, yeah, it's completely true. It's completely true. Okay, he wakes up late. Relatable. I also don't have the problem of when I nap. I don't always get up on time, as my family realizes. The maester found the crib. He goes to the thing. He has like a ring. I think he can put it in. Uh,
Now he has pockets in his sleeves.
oh, is that what it is? You're right. Okay. Nobody invited him, which is sad. We have more of Patchface being cringe. We got a little bit of sensory description. Here there's no loud laughter, no raucous shouting, such as marred the dignity of other men's feasts. Lord Stannis did not permit such. Stannis is so funny. He's like, no, like Stannis is like the principal from like Footloose.
He's an edgelord.
He's like, nobody laugh. This isn't funny. Okay. He went crashing down. Oh, okay, yeah, this is sad. Patchface lurched into Cressen, knocking his cane out from under him. They went crashing down together amidst the rushes and a tangle of arms and legs, while a sudden gale of laughter went up around them. No doubt it was a comical sight. There's almost a nightmarish quality to the rest of this scene of like that the cliche dream of showing up to class and realizing you're naked and everybody laughs at you. Like there's a sense of like almost that kind of nightmarishness to everybody finds Cressen laugh worthy, who when he was this proud old man who should have respect in that moment.
Yeah, it is so cruel. I really do hate it.
Yeah, but his hip was in such pain that he felt for a moment half afraid that it had broken all over. He felt strong hands grasp him under the arms and lift him to his fate. "Thank you, sir," he murmured, turning to see which knight had come to his aid. "Maester," said Lady Melisandre, her deep voice flavored with the music of the Jade Sea. "You ought to take more care." And then you can do this description. This is also a good way of introducing the character because it's like she's being nice, actually helping him, which makes the whole thing a little bit more complicated than her just being like, "I'm evil."
Yes, but notice the tone of the description as well, since this is Maester Cressen seeing her. As ever, she wore red from head to heel, a long loose gown of flowing silk as bright as fire, with daggered sleeves and deep slashes in the bodice that showed glimpses of a darker blood-red fabric beneath. Around her throat was a red gold choker, tighter than any maester's chain, ornamented with a single great ruby. Her hair was not the orange or strawberry colour of a common red-haired men, but a deep burnished copper that shone in the light of the torches. Even her eyes were red, but her skin was smooth and white, unblemished, pale as cream. Slender, she was graceful, taller than most knights, with full breasts and a narrow waist and a heart-shaped face. Men's eyes that had once found her did not quickly look away, not even a maester's eyes. Many called her beautiful. She was not beautiful. She was red, and terrible, and red.
I love that description at the end. She was not beautiful. And like that really pops very well. And
yes,
it really gives
because
you
he clearly the description before that is objectively of someone who is very beautiful.
And
then
he's like,
he gives us his feelings towards her. Because there is something about her that unsettles him.
Yeah, and there's the suddenness, the abruptness is part of what helps that come across. And also, I like the repetition of red here. Like, it should feel childish, but it's almost more just, there's something creepy about the fact that it's just red. It's him actually subverting his rule of threes, which is kind of a nice thing because you're used to his writing working a certain way. She's nice to him again. They're playing nice. "Only children fear the dark," he told her, yet even as he said the words, he heard Patchface take up his song again. "The shadows come to dance, my lord, dance, my lord, dance, my lord." Okay, you can read this part. I want to see what voice you do for Melisandre.
"Now here is a riddle," Melisandre said. "A clever fool and a foolish wise man." Bending, she picked up Patchface's helm from where it had fallen and set it on Cressen's head. The cowbells rang softly as the tin bucket slid down over his ears. "A crown to match your chain, Lord Maester," she announced. All around them, men were laughing.
Yeah, that's so sad. It's also actually clever on her part to kind of defang a rival, so to speak. But again, there's that nightmarish quality of like the worst, most embarrassing thing that would never happen in life is happening.
Yeah, and she's kind of ridiculing his lack of faith in her god.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, very much so. Cressen pressed his lips together and fought to still his rage. She thought he was feeble and helpless, but she would learn otherwise before the night was done. Old he might be, yet still he was a maester of the citadel. "I need no crown but truth," he told her, removing the fool's helm from his head. So this is a thing Martin does a lot, and is a thing people do in real life, which is that they draw strength from identities and institutions and parts of themselves. So he's not just a person. He's a maester of the Citadel, and that means something to him. And a lot of the books are about like what do those, like because John draws a lot of strength up points from being a man of the Night's Watch, even as that's challenged. What does it mean to be one? How does he define that versus it define him? And also, again, this is a thing people do in real life all the time, and so it comes off as very effective in getting you into his mind state. Hot bitchy woman alert. That's funny. There are truths in this world that are not taught at Old Town. Melisandre turned from him in a swirl of red silk and made her way back to the high table, where King Stannis and his queen were seated. Cressen handed the antlered tin bucket back to Patchface and made to follow. Maester Pylos sat in his place. The old man could only stop and stare. Maester Pylos, he said at last, you did not wake me. His grace commanded me to let you rest. Pylos had at least the grace to blush. He told me you were not needed here. So sad. Yeah, because this is also like the worst thing that could happen to Cressen is his king
not including him anymore. Not needing him anymore.
Yeah, being like, go sit in the cook chair. Okay. There's a bunch of... So sometimes Martin does do this thing where he he lists too many things, and your brain basically goes like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, he's introducing some of the side players that will become relevant later.
Yeah, but in this moment, like, hurry it along, maybe. Here, you can read these 2 paragraphs.
You are too ill and too confused to be of use to me, old man. It sounded like Lord Stannis' voice, but it could not be. It could not. Pallas will counsel me henceforth. Already he works with the ravens, since you no longer can climb the rookery. I will not have you kill yourself in my service. Maester Cressen blinked. Stannis, my lord, my sad, sullen boy, son I never had. You must not do this. Don't you know how much I've cared for you, lived for you, loved you, despite all? Yes, loved you, better than Robert even, or Renly, for you were the one unloved, the one who needed me most. And yet all he said was, as you command, my lord. But I am hungry. Might I not have a place at your table? At your side? I belong at your side.
So there's this is just a heartbreaking paragraph, but over here he says, well, I will not have you kill yourself in my service. This is a nice line because it adds nuance to what he was just saying. What the really mean thing Stannis said, and it kind of helps you contextualize it as like, oh no, Stannis is just doing that thing where he's being overly blunt.
Stannis never overtly shows care for others, but he sneaks it in that I will not have you kill yourself in my service. That is Stannis speak for, you're old, I wanted to let you rest. I didn't want you to have to climb the stairs for me. Like you have earned a rest, old man. But Stannis doesn't say stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Stop praying me, manly man.
He's very flat in how he says things and a little sarcastic. And so, again, I think it's one of the things that on first read, you may read Stannis as very mean, but on reread, there's more nuance there through little lines of dialogue like that. Too far, Cressen thought dully, looking at where Sir Davos was seated. Half of the Lord Bannermen were between the smuggler and the high table. I must be closer to her if I am to get the strangler into her cup. Yet how? Patchface is being cringe again. He goes and sits down. I'm telling you. Okay, and then let me see, because I think we're nearly... Oh, wow. Okay, never mind. We aren't nearly done. Oh yeah, so
Just
so what
read
happens
a longer paragraph.
So basically, Cressen is like, hey, I gotta get to Melisandre. So like this is where he's kind of clever. Oh no, he isn't kind of clever. Keeps trying to argue with Stannis about it in front of his men, which is a terrible idea. Um, you think not? The Rubia Mouse. Gods make uncertain allies at best, the old man insisted, and that one has no power here. So this is more of a general thing about A Song of Ice and Fire, but nobody is as religious as they should be in these books. Like, people in the past very much believed in their religion, and nowadays we have such a secular society that we don't really think about it that much. It's kind of just taken for a given that people don't super believe in gods. But like that's kind of just a general, it's not even a complaint with the series, it's just a thing to note, is that like, yeah, the books would be a little bit more realistic if everyone was a little bit more religious.
Well, we are also following the people who are in power. And religion was a very effective way to quell the common folk and to bind them to a certain set of rules and beliefs that govern their lives. I do think that it was more common for the ruling people to question religion because they didn't need it as much.
I don't know though, because they did in terms of the divine right of kings. Like that is the center of their power.
Yes, they needed legitimacy, but that is not the same thing. Like the common people were told, and now we're talking real world religions, like the religion told people that your life is shit, but you will be rewarded in the next life if you live good in this life.
Yeah, no, that's true, I think, but it's something that like there would be a certain, well, okay, but and see the other thing is that maesters are a secular organization that does a lot of things that the Catholic Church did in actual Roman, or not Roman times, in medieval times.
Yeah,
so it does actually.
The maesters aren't religious.
Right, whereas almost every kind of learning of that type would have come from like a church, and so it would have come with a side dose of Catholic guilt. So, you think not? The ruby at Melisandre's throat caught the light as she turned her head, and for an instant it seemed to glow bright as the comet. If you speak such folly, Maester, you ought to wear your crown again. Yes, Lady Celis agreed. Patch his helm. It suits you well, old man. Put it on again. I command you. Lord Stannis' eyes were shadowed beneath his heavy brow, his mouth tight as his jaw worked silently. He always ground his teeth when he was angry. Fool, he growled at last. My lady wife commands. Give Cressen your helm. This part is just so heartbreaking. I hate it. No, the old maester thought. This is not you, not your way. You were always just, always hard, yet never cruel, never. You did not understand mockery, no more than you understood laughter. The maester sat silent while the fool set the antlered bucket on his brow. Cressen bowed his head beneath the weight. His bells clanged. Perhaps he ought to sing his counsel henceforth, Lady Celis said. You go too far, woman, Lord Stannis said. He is an old man, and he served me well. I never quite understood why Stannis does this. Like, again, it's always felt a little out of character to me.
I think it's because, number one, Cressen is causing a commotion, and he's by disagreeing openly with Melisandre, he's putting Stannis in a precarious situation where Stannis has to pick a side. And the thing with Stannis is that he doesn't want to pick a side. Either he tells his lady to shut up, which is discourteous and will not gain him any favors, or he must shame this old man that he thinks has served him well. So he picks the lesser evil in letting them have a little fun at Cressen, because Cressen is just one man. But in the way he grinds his teeth, it also suggests that Stannis isn't happy about it.
Yeah, that's true. And again, he's not willing to. This line, "You go too far, woman," is very like, okay.
He does have not longer.
Yeah, and I guess the thing is, he does. You're right. Need to performance of legitimacy is very important in a medieval world, because that's the only thing.
And the queen is so many levels above the maester.
And also just the religion, like he kind of needs the followers of the Red God, so he can't really have people shit talking them.
That too. But if you don't think about all these nuances, yes, it's a very mean thing to do. Very. And
I will serve you to the last, my sweet lord, my poor lonely son. Cressen thought, for suddenly he saw the way. This is so we just finished reading I was going to say the rabbit bears its teeth. The spirit bears its teeth, which is a book with a very strong inner italicized voice. And I think this is such a, this is such a, like the little rodent teeth. Rabbits aren't rodents. Actually, are they? I don't know. This is
Yes,
a
they
much
are.
more effective. This is a much more effective line than that book could ever hope to have. And I will serve you to the last, my sweet lord, my poor lonely son. And that, like, this is the kind of back and forth inner thoughts that really add just a ton, and why it's so sad. And then he
Hmm.
also he takes so much care with the flake of poison. That, like, this is the motion, this is the thing I must do in this moment. But it
And
feels
the
like such a
sleight of
big
hand.
thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Mayhaps I have been a fool. Lady Melisandre, will you share a cup of wine
Melisandre.
with me? I always say Melisandre, but like that's not correct, I don't think. Here, you do it.
Melisandre. Mayhaps I have been a fool. Lady Melisandre, will you share a cup of wine with me? A cup in honour of your god, your Lord of Light? A cup to toast his power? The Red Woman studied him. If you wish. She could
I
feel
love that
them all.
she immediately knows something is up. It's one of the ways that like she comes off as very creepy. She's like, "What the fuck are you up to, old man?"
The Lord, one of the first things she learned was to see things that concern her own safety, so she has probably already seen this exchange.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
He could feel them all watching him. Davos clutched at him as he
Sorry.
left the bench, catching his sleeve with his fingers that Lord Stannis had shortened. What were you doing? He whispered. A thing that must be done, Maester Cressen answered, for the sake of the realm and the soul of my lord. He shook off Davos's hand, spilling a drop of wine in the rushes. She met him beneath the high table with every man's eyes upon them, but Cressen saw
I really
only
like this
her.
line, for the record. Sorry, go ahead, keep going.
Red silk, red eyes, the ruby at her throat, red lips curled in a faint smile as she put her hand atop his own around the cup. Her skin felt hot, feverish. It is not too late to spill the wine, Maester. No, he whispered hoarsely. No.
This is
As
so
you
great
will.
because like it's so creepy that she knows somehow, and then she's still offering him the chance to pull back. But and that's the thing that makes it kind of read like a horror story, is that like he himself is kind of complicit in what's happening, and like he's the one pushing. He's trapped in his mind to do this thing, even as there's a power he does not like, and there is an eldritch power he does not understand that she is beholden to. And it's such a good. It's so creepy.
Yeah, he
Um,
feels like he must do this. He can't back down. And she gives him the option. And she's also so flippant in the face of his death. She's like, "You're already dead, old man, but I'm going to give you the option."
it characterizes her really well as an action of like she is this creature of magic who's not necessarily evil but also kind of evil as fuck. So it's like it's a good introduction to her character. There's only like three
Mm-hmm.
paragraphs, so you go and read them.
As you will. Melisandre of Ashire took the cup from his hands and drank long and deep. There was only half a swallow of wine remaining when she offered it back to him. And now you. His hands were shaking, but he made himself be strong. A maester of the citadel must not be afraid. The wine was sour on his tongue. He let the empty cup drop from his hands to shatter on the floor. He does have power here, my lord, the woman said, and fire cleanses. At her throat the ruby shimmered redly. Cressen tried to reply, but his words caught in his throat. His cough became a terrible, thin whistle as he strained to suck in air. Iron fingers tightened around his neck. As he sank to his knees, still he shook his head, denying her power, denying her magic, denying her god. And the cowbells pealed in his antlers, singing, "Fool, fool, fool," while the Red Woman looked down on him in pity, the candles, flames dancing in her red, red eyes.
Okay, so this is what's fascinating, is that technically all the power that she's used here is not dying from a poison, and yet it feels so much more creepy and magical than like so many other magic systems and depictions in books. And that's because the
Yes.
story, it is an element of the story, and it has been built up and is part of the atmosphere. And that's what I love about how this series uses magic and creates it.
Yes, we spent this entire prologue building this old man, building why he must do this, why he must save the king he loves, and how he takes a terrible poison. And she just quaffs the entire glass and remains untouched.
And I also love
And
how
up
he's still.
until this point, also, we've been led to believe that her god does not exist. Like, it's just superstition. Like, all religion is just superstition. The seven gods is superstition. And now
And
she
yet
stands over him.
there's this
And
power that, yeah.
it's
It's
incredible. It's very
so
powerful.
creepy. Yeah, his prologues are always so good. And also I love how creepy it is that he still drinks it. Like there's almost this sense of like I almost compulsion to it, that like he has to follow through like the power of the act. He's not quite he doesn't quite know yet that like I don't know. There's a compulsion to it that I find is really creepy. And again, it springs from him as a character and his thought space that
Yes, and
isn't
also
just
let's
objective.
say the poison did work, and it just took a second for her to be affected. Like he is dead either way.
Mm-hmm.
Like
And to be
either
fair,
he
this is
tried and
a
failed to poison her, or he tried and succeeded to poison her, and his life is forfeit.
and the thing is, he's already at the end of his life in terms of like the indignities of being old. So there's an extent to which, like, what he's gonna go to prison for like a couple years. He's already like the things he wanted out of life are now done, and so yeah,
And Lady
he's gonna do
Celise
this
would
one last
demand
thing.
his death.
Yeah, true, actually. And so, like, yeah, and actually, he would probably be burned alive, which was not a fun way to go.
No.
So, yeah, no, okay. So that's the chapter, guys. This is one of the best. Like Martin is such a good short story writer, and that's what all of his prologues are. And this one is just so evocative. It's so creepy. It sets up so much for what's going to happen later in the book and the themes of the book and the series. It's masterful in those ways where he is able to do so many things at once.
Yes, and one thing Martin is very good at is subverting your expectations.
Yeah,
Because
it's
who started this prologue and thought that it would end like this? The
yeah,
thing is,
no,
he builds like a very strong sense of realism and actions having consequences. So he creates this expectation that, when someone is poisoned, they will die, and
mm-hmm,
the decision will have some sort of rippling effect, a butterfly effect. And instead,
mm-hmm.
he just subverts it by the end, and suddenly there's a power beyond the apparent, a power that we know very little about. Just like when the dragons are initially hatched, like the entire first book talks about dragons and talks about how magic is gone, and
Mm-hmm.
then the dragons hatch at the end. And here we open this book, and up until this point, gods don't exist. And suddenly, this priestess is just standing over him as he is dying and denying the existence of her god. And she just
Again,
looks down at him like,
all she's doing is not being poisoned, but it's so powerful and creepy. And it's because it's just this one drop of magic in an otherwise normal world, and so you look at it
yes,
and you focus on it.
yeah. The restraint with magic makes the magic
Yes.
that does appear more mystical feeling, more powerful feeling. It feels old. And I am personally very partial towards soft magic systems when they
Mm-hmm.
are used in this particular way. Like magic is this mysterious power that we
Yeah, I
don't
love it.
know the full implications of. And it makes it all the more wondrous.
Yeah, and yeah, I think it's it's such an interesting. It's I remember because I remember before, in terms of my growth as like a writer, before Song of Ice and Fire, I'd always have very hard magic systems, and afterwards I'd always have very soft ones, and I would always be like, "This is exactly what I want to do with my magic. This is exactly the kind of thing." Like these books were very like I joke about it on the podcast a lot, but like these
Bye,
books were
science.
very influential to me.
And hey, well,
Horse paintings in Lenny's background. They're pretty good. They look like but they're kind of missing parts.
yeah, they're not finished, obviously. Like this one, the one on the right, I have just left for you guys. I have just sketched out. So if I do
Oh,
this,
and those are the Hoyas, right? On your right.
this is a Hoya. This is Croniana, and behind it is Hoya Sunrise. This is a lily of some sort, and I have some pelargoniums as well.
You guys
And
don't understand,
the
but
blue thing is my prop box.
my mom and Lindbergh talk about Hoyas with me as an intermediary because they both really like them. My mom's crazy about plants,
Yeah,
so
I
I
love
know way
that.
too much about them now.
I'm gonna take photos of all my Hoyas and just swamp you with them so you can
My
show
mom,
them to your mom.
yeah, so funny. All right, well, thank you for joining us, guys. I won't have to post this because this will already be live. I'm not sure if I'm gonna leave it here on this channel or I've been thinking in terms of convenience. It may just be easiest to start another YouTube channel just to post these on. But these will stay up on Patreon. Yeah, thank you all for joining. Any last thoughts, Lindbergh?
No, just thank you for showing up, everyone. It was great fun. I look
It's
forward
nice
to developing this and becoming more eloquent.
I'd also think it'd be kind of cool to maybe do like a little bit of Shogun or War and Peace someday. 'Cause those
Oh,
are
War and
two
Peace, please, please, War and Peace.
I think it's very fun to do these kind of close readings. So, all right, we will see you all later.
Bye.